The dust of a foreign country still felt like it was in my throat, a permanent grit I thought I would never wash away. For 18 long months, that dust, the relentless sun, and the faces of my brothers in arms were my entire world. My life was partitioned into 4-hour shifts, lukewarm coffee, and the worn photograph of my wife, Melissa, that I kept tucked inside my helmet. Her smile in that picture was my North Star, the fixed point I navigated by. It was the promise of home, of clean sheets, of a life where the loudest sound was not an explosion but the evening news on the television. I had done my duty, served my tour, and all I wanted was to return to the quiet simplicity of the life we had built. Before I left, our life was exactly that. Simple. I worked as a master mechanic specializing in heavy diesel engines. The pay was good, honest money for honest work. I loved the logic of it, the way a complex machine could be understood, taken apart, and put back together in perfect working order. Melissa used to joke that I treated everything like an engine, looking for the root cause of any problem. She worked part-time as a receptionist at a local real estate agency, a job she said was boring but paid for her weekly manicures and lunches with her friends. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house I had inherited from my grandfather, a place with good bones and a big yard. I spent my weekends fixing it up, replacing the old plumbing, refinishing the hardwood floors, building a deck out back. It was my project, our home. I thought we were happy. I truly did. I saw her contentment in the small things. The way she would hum while she cooked dinner, the way she would curl up against me on the sofa to watch a movie. But looking back, I can see the cracks I chose to ignore. Her conversations increasingly revolved around her friends' new cars, their kitchen renovations, their trips to Europe. Her mother, Carol, would visit and make subtle, cutting remarks about my profession. "It must be so tiring, Jacob, all that physical labor," she would say, her eyes scanning our living room as if calculating its resale value. "Melissa has such refined tastes. She was meant for a softer life." I would just nod and smile, thinking it was harmless chatter. I believed Melissa's love for me was stronger than her mother's materialistic ambitions for her. I was wrong. My deployment was sudden. My unit was called up with little warning. The farewell was a blur of tears and promises. I told her to be strong, to use our savings for anything she needed, to write me every day. I promised I would come home safe. She promised she would wait for me, that our love was worth waiting for. I held onto that promise like a lifeline. Her letters and emails were my shield against the loneliness and the fear. They were filled with news from home, gossip about her friends, complaints about the leaky faucet I had not gotten around to fixing. They were normal, and in that place, normal was everything. About 6 months in, her messages became less frequent. She said she was busy, taking on more hours at work. Then she mentioned she had started taking evening classes in interior design. I was proud of her. I encouraged her, telling her she had a great eye for color and style. I sent her extra money from my combat pay to help with tuition. I pictured her sitting in a classroom, sketching out designs for beautiful homes, and it made me smile. It felt like she was building a future for us, just as I was trying to survive the present to get back to it. The distance felt immense, but my trust in her was absolute. It was the foundation of my world. The last month of my tour was a countdown. Every day was a number I crossed off a mental calendar. The flight home was the longest of my life, a 20-hour journey across oceans and time zones. I did not sleep. I just stared out the small window at the clouds, my heart pounding with an anticipation that was almost painful. Marcus, my best friend from basic training who had gotten out a few years prior to go to law school, was supposed to pick me up. But I got a text from him as we were landing. It said there was an emergency and he could not make it, but he had sent a car for me. He said to call him as soon as I could. I felt a flicker of unease, but chalked it up to exhaustion. When I stepped out of the terminal and into the humid air of home, I saw the driver holding a sign with my name on it. He was a stoic man who did not say much, just took my bags and led me to a black town car. I slid into the back seat, the cool leather a shocking comfort after months of canvas and metal. I expected him to head toward our house, toward the suburbs. Instead, He turned onto the highway leading into the city. "Excuse me," I said, leaning forward. "My house is the other way." The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His expression was neutral, but his eyes held a hint of something I could not read. Pity, perhaps. "My instructions are to take you to St. Mary's Hospital." Sir, my blood ran cold. "The hospital? Why? Is my wife okay? Was there an accident?" My mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios, each one worse than the last. "I was only told to take you there," he said, his voice flat. "And to give you this." He passed a sealed envelope back to me. It was from Marcus. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The note was brief and to the point, just like Marcus himself. "Jake, I am so sorry to do this over a note. Call me before you go inside. Things are not what you think. Your wife is fine physically. She's in the maternity ward." Maternity ward. The words did not compute. We had not been trying for a baby. It was impossible. I had been gone for 18 months. The math was simple, brutal, and absolute. I felt a strange calm descend over me, the kind of hyper-focused clarity that comes before a fight. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I did not call Marcus. I did not need to. I needed to see it for myself. I walked through the automatic doors of the hospital. The scent of antiseptic and floor wax a sharp assault on my senses. My uniform, which I had worn with such pride on the flight home, now felt like a costume. I looked out of place, a soldier in a world of soft pastels and quiet murmurs. I found the maternity ward on the 3rd floor. I asked the nurse at the reception desk for Melissa's room number. She gave me a bright, cheerful smile. "Oh, you must be the proud father. She's been waiting for you. Room 304. Congratulations." I did not correct her. I just nodded and walked down the hall, my boots silent on the polished linoleum. Each step felt heavy, as if I were wading through deep water. I stopped outside room 304. I could hear voices inside, Melissa's and another woman's, which I recognized as her mother, Carol. I took a deep breath, the way I did before breaching a door, and I pushed it open. The scene inside was a perfect domestic tableau. Carol was sitting in a chair by the window, beaming. Melissa was propped up in the bed, looking tired but happy. And in her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was a baby. It was tiny, its face wrinkled and new. And it was black. There was no ambiguity, no question, no room for doubt. The child's skin was a beautiful, deep brown, its hair a tight cap of black curls. It was a handsome baby, and it was not mine. Melissa's face lit up when she saw me. "Jacob, you're here. I was so worried you wouldn't make it in time." She tried to sit up further, her smile wide and guileless. It was the most shocking part of it all. She was not ashamed. She was not afraid. She seemed to think this was a situation that could be explained away, managed. Carol stood up, her own smile faltering as she took in my expression. I had not said a word. I just stood in the doorway, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, my face a mask of stone. I looked from Melissa to the child in her arms, and then back to her. The silence in the room stretched, becoming thick and suffocating. "Well, say something, Jacob," Carol said, her voice sharp with an edge of defensiveness. "Don't just stand there like a statue. Congratulate your wife." I ignored her. My focus was entirely on Melissa. I watched as the happy glow in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by confusion, and then by a dawning flicker of fear. She finally understood that I was not playing the part she had written for me in this bizarre play. "Jake, honey, I know this is a shock," she began, her voice taking on a placating tone. "We need to talk. I can explain everything." I took one step into the room. I set my duffel bag down on the floor softly. Then I looked at her, and for the first time since walking through the hospital doors, I spoke. My voice was quiet, devoid of any emotion. It was a simple statement of fact. "No, you do not." Then I turned around, picked up my bag, and walked out of the room. I did not look back. I walked down the hallway, past the smiling nurse, through the lobby, and out into the afternoon sun. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Jake? Did you go in?" "I did," I said, my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, man. I am so sorry." "Do not be," I said, walking toward the street to hail a cab. I needed to see it. Now I know what I'm dealing with. I need a lawyer, Marcus. I need you. "You've got me," he said, his voice firm. "Where are you going now?" "A hotel," I said. And then we start making a plan. That was the turning point. In that hospital room, the man I had been, the trusting husband, the hopeful romantic, died. He was a casualty of a war I had not even known I was fighting. In his place stood someone else, someone colder, more methodical. Someone who treated betrayal not as an emotional wound, but as a tactical problem to be solved. Melissa had grossly underestimated me. She, her mother, and her new life were now just an objective. And I never failed an objective. I spent the first 48 hours in a sterile hotel room, living on black coffee and room service. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying every letter, every email, every phone call from the past 18 months. I was a mechanic looking for the flaw in the engine, a soldier debriefing a failed mission. The signs had all been there, small inconsistencies I had brushed aside. The vague answers about how she spent her weekends. The new, expensive-sounding restaurants she mentioned. The way she stopped saying, "I love you," at the end of our calls, switching to a more casual "talk soon." I had attributed it all to the stress of our separation. I had made excuses for her because I wanted to believe in the woman in the photograph. That woman was a fiction. Marcus came to my hotel room on the third day. He brought a box of donuts and a thick file folder. He looked older than I remembered, his face etched with the seriousness of his profession. We had been through hell together in basic, and that bond was unbreakable. He did not offer platitudes or empty comforts. He just sat down, opened the folder, and got to work. "First things first," he said, pushing a document across the table. "I took the liberty of pulling the preliminary title report on your house. It's still solely in your name." "Good. That simplifies things," I nodded. "My grandfather left it to me, free and clear, 5 years before I even met Melissa." "Okay. Bank accounts. We have one joint checking and one joint savings. My pay is direct deposited into the checking. We used the savings for emergencies." I explained how I had sent her extra money for her classes, for home repairs, for anything she said she needed. Marcus wrote it all down on a legal pad, his pen scratching in the quiet room. "We need to sever that financial tie immediately," he said. "Tomorrow morning you're going to the bank. You're going to open a new account in your name only. You will redirect your military pay to that account. You will then withdraw exactly 50% of the current balance from the joint accounts and deposit it into your new one. Not a penny more. We do everything by the book. Clean." Irrefutable, his calmness was an anchor. He was giving me a procedure, a checklist. It was a language I understood. "What's next?" I asked. "Next, we find out who he is," Marcus said. "The father. We need his name. We need to know his financial situation. We need to know his relationship with Melissa. Private investigator is our best bet. I know a good one. Ex-military police. He's discreet and thorough," I agreed without hesitation. Emotion was a luxury I could not afford. This was about logistics now. It was about asset allocation and evidence collection. While Marcus made the call to the investigator, I stared out the window at the city lights. My phone had been buzzing constantly for 2 days. Dozens of texts and missed calls from Melissa. A few angry, rambling voicemails from her mother, Carol. I had not listened to any of them. I deleted them without a second thought. They were noise, distractions from the mission. The investigator's name was Peterson. He met us the next day. He was a compact, wiry man with pale blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He listened to my story without a flicker of judgment on his face. When I was done, he simply nodded. "Standard infidelity case with a few complications. The long-term deployment makes the timeline clean. You'll need a paternity test to make it legally binding, of course. But for the purposes of the divorce proceedings in a no-fault state, her conduct and financial deception will be the main leverage, he continued. I'll start with surveillance on the house. I'll run the plates of any vehicle that visits. I'll follow her. I'll find out where she works, who she eats lunch with, where she goes at night. You'll have a full report with photos and video within a week. While Peterson began his work, I followed Marcus's instructions to the letter. I went to the bank and executed the financial separation. The teller who helped me was the same woman who had set up our joint account years ago. She gave me a sympathetic look but asked no questions. I moved my belongings out of the house while Melissa was out. I took only what was mine. My clothes, my tools, my books, and the few photos I had of my parents. I left everything else. The furniture she had picked out, the new kitchen appliances she had bought while I was away, the life she had built on a foundation of lies. It was all hers now. I rented a small, furnished apartment on a month-to-month lease. It was sparse and impersonal, but it was a secure base of operations. A week later, Peterson delivered his first report. It was a detailed timeline of Melissa's life, cross-referenced with financial statements I had given him from our joint account. The man's name was Richard Sterling. He was a mid-level partner in the real estate firm where Melissa worked. He was married with 2 children in college. He drove a new Mercedes and lived in a large house in the wealthiest part of town. Peterson's report included photographs of Melissa and Richard having dinner at expensive restaurants, holding hands while walking into a hotel, and him visiting our house late at night, always leaving before dawn. The most damning evidence was the dates. Their affair had started almost a year and a half ago, just a few weeks after I deployed. The expensive dinners, the hotel stays, the new designer clothes Melissa had bought, it was all there in the credit card statements. She had been funding her new life with my money, my combat pay, the money I had earned in a war zone, trusting it was going toward our future. She had even used our joint savings, the emergency fund, to pay for a weekend trip to a wine country resort with him. The charge was listed right there, Sterling Vintner's couples package. But there was another layer to it. Marcus had done some digging of his own. While I was deployed, my grandmother had passed away. I had been unable to come home for the funeral. She had left me her entire estate, which included a significant portfolio of stocks and, more importantly, a large tract of undeveloped land just outside the city. It had been in our family for generations. I had not told Melissa about the full extent of it. I had mentioned my grandmother passed, of course, but I kept the details of the inheritance to myself. It was a private grief, and honestly, the paperwork was a problem for another day. I had planned to tell her everything when I got home, to use the money to build us a new house on that land, to finally give her the softer life her mother always talked about. Now, that land was my fortress. Marcus had immediately helped me place the entire inheritance into an irrevocable trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. It was legally untouchable. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when Marcus cross-referenced Richard Sterling's business dealings. His firm, Sterling Coal Properties, had recently submitted a zoning proposal to the city council. They wanted to build a massive luxury housing development. The proposed location was a parcel of land known as the Miller Farm. My grandmother's name was Eleanor Miller. It was my land. They had been planning to build their future on my past, assuming they could acquire the land from some distant, grieving soldier at a bargain price. The arrogance was breathtaking. Melissa finally managed to get through to me. I had blocked her number, but she called from a restricted line and I answered by mistake. Her voice was a syrupy blend of fake concern and sharp accusation. Jacob? Finally. I've been calling for weeks. Why are you doing this? Why are you treating me like a criminal? I came home from the hospital and the house was half empty. You just left? Without a word. I let the silence sit for a moment before I answered. I believe my actions spoke clearly enough. This is about the baby, isn't it? She said, her voice rising. I told you I can explain. It was a mistake. A stupid, one-time mistake. It doesn't have to mean the end of us. We can work through this. People have affairs, Jacob. It happens. It was not a one-time mistake, Melissa, I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. It was a year-long campaign of deception funded by my salary. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond. Her attempts at manipulation were pathetic. She was not sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. She believed her tears and a flimsy excuse would be enough to reset the board. She still saw me as simple, predictable Jacob, the man who fixed things. She had no idea that I was not trying to fix this. I was dismantling it piece by piece. The divorce papers were served the next day. Her reaction was explosive. Marcus received a string of furious calls from her and her mother. They accused me of being cruel, vindictive, and controlling. They could not believe I had frozen the joint accounts. How is she supposed to live? Carol had shrieked at Marcus over the phone. She has a newborn baby to care for. Marcus had calmly replied, I suggest she contact the child's father for support. My client is no longer legally or morally responsible for her expenses. Her initial legal filing was a work of fiction. She demanded the house, 70% of all our assets, and substantial lifelong alimony. She claimed my sudden departure and erratic behavior had caused her extreme emotional distress. Her lawyer, a slick downtown type whose website promised aggressive representation, painted a picture of me as an unstable soldier, possibly suffering from PTSD, who had abandoned his loving wife in her time of need. We responded with a simple, factual counterclaim. We agreed to the divorce. We did not contest her custody of the child. We asked only for a fair and equitable division of marital assets, as defined by the period of our marriage before my deployment. We did not mention the affair. We did not mention Richard. We did not mention the land. We held all our cards close to our chest. This drove her and her lawyer insane. They expected a fight, a messy, emotional battle. We gave them quiet, methodical compliance. It was a strategic move on Marcus's part. Let them show their hand. Let them expose their greed. Melissa's confidence grew as the weeks went on. She misinterpreted my silence as weakness. She moved Richard into my house. Peterson's reports showed his Mercedes parked in my driveway every night. They were playing house, living on the fumes of our joint account, which was quickly dwindling. She threw a lavish party to celebrate the baby's 1-month milestone. Peterson got pictures. Richard was there, posing with the baby, smiling like the proud father. He was still married, of course, but his wife was reportedly living in their vacation home out of state. The first mediation session was held in a sterile conference room in a downtown office building. I saw Melissa for the first time since the hospital. She looked good. She wore an expensive dress I had never seen before and carried a designer handbag. She refused to make eye contact with me. Richard was not there. Her lawyer did all the talking, reiterating their demands. Mr. Miller's offer is insulting, he said, gesturing dismissively at our proposal. My client is a new mother. She has been a devoted wife to a man who was absent for nearly 2 years. She maintained his home. She is entitled to the security she has earned. Marcus leaned back in his chair, calm and composed. Your client is entitled to 50% of the assets accrued during the marriage. Mr. Miller's inheritance, which he received while on active duty, is legally his separate property. The house was his separate property before the marriage even began. Our offer is not only fair, it is generous, Melissa's lawyer scoffed. What inheritance? A few $1,000s from his grandmother? That's hardly a factor here. We are talking about the primary marital residence and a lifetime of support. This was the moment. Marcus looked at me, and I gave him a slight nod. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single photograph. It was one of Peterson's. A crystal-clear shot of Melissa and Richard, kissing on the balcony of the hotel at Sterling Vintners. He slid it across the polished table. Melissa's lawyer glanced at it and pushed it away. So what? My client is a human being. She was lonely. Her husband was thousands of miles away. A single indiscretion does not negate her rights. Look at the date, Marcus said softly. Melissa finally looked at me, a flicker of panic in her eyes. She picked up the photo. Her face went pale. The date was printed in the corner. It was from 16 months ago, 3 months before the baby could have possibly been conceived. It was not a one-time mistake that resulted in a pregnancy. It was a long-standing, calculated affair. "This is inadmissible," her lawyer blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is a no-fault state. Adultery has no bearing on financial settlements." "You're correct," Marcus said smoothly. "It has no bearing on the division of marital assets. But it has a significant bearing on the credibility of a person claiming emotional distress and demanding support based on her status as a devoted wife, and financial infidelity, such as using marital funds to finance an affair, is something the court takes very seriously. This is just one photograph. We have a great many more, along with receipts, for hotels, for dinners, for gifts, all paid for from the joint account my client funded with his deployment pay." Melissa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not listening to this. This is a violation of my privacy." She looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. "You did this. You spied on me. You are a sick, controlling monster." "Jacob." I met her gaze and held it. I did not raise my voice. I did not show any emotion at all. "The truth is not an attack, Melissa. It is just the truth." She stormed out of the room, followed by her flustered lawyer. The mediation was over. We had won the first skirmish. We had shown them we had evidence, but we still had not revealed the full extent of our arsenal. We had not mentioned the land, or Richard's business plans. That was the ace we were holding for the final battle. The failed mediation sent Melissa into a spiral. She became desperate. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, trying to get access to my financial records, specifically anything related to my inheritance. They were on a fishing expedition, suspecting there was more than I was letting on, but with no proof. The judge denied their requests, citing the clear legal precedent of separate property. Meanwhile, Richard's world was also starting to crumble. His wife, it turned out, was not content to stay in their vacation home forever. She filed for divorce, and her legal team was far more competent than Melissa's. They began a forensic audit of Richard's finances and his company's books. The Sterling Coal Properties development deal stalled at the city council, delayed by anonymous but well-founded environmental impact concerns that Marcus had discreetly raised through a third party. Richard started to pull away from Melissa. The pressure was getting to him. Peterson's reports noted that his car was no longer at the house every night. He and Melissa were photographed having a heated argument in a public park. He was a man who craved status and success, and she was rapidly becoming a liability. The shallow foundation of their relationship, built on fantasy and greed, was cracking under the first real-world stress test. Then came the desperate plea. She showed up at my apartment building one evening. I was coming home from the gym when I saw her waiting by the entrance, holding the baby carrier. She looked haggard. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt. The confident fury from the mediation was replaced by a raw, pleading desperation. "Jacob, please. We need to talk," she said, her voice cracking. I stopped a few feet away from her. "There's nothing left to talk about, Melissa. We can communicate through our lawyers." "No, I can't do this anymore. The lawyers, the fighting. It's ruining everything." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Richard is pulling away. His wife is trying to take everything. He says this is all my fault." I just looked at her. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. It was like watching a stranger describe their problems. The baby started to fuss in the carrier. A small, unhappy sound. "I made a mistake, Jacob. A terrible, terrible mistake," she sobbed. "I was lonely. And Richard, he promised me so much. A different kind of life. But it was all a lie. You were the one who was always real. You were always solid. Please, can't we just go back? We can raise him together. I'll tell everyone he's adopted. We can start over." Her words were astonishing. The audacity to stand there, holding another man's child, and ask me to erase the past 18 months was beyond anything I could have imagined. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to be her solution, to fix the mess she had made of her life, just like I used to fix the leaky faucets and the broken screen door. I shook my head slowly. "Go back to what, Melissa? There is nothing to go back to. You destroyed it. You and I are not we anymore. That person you're talking to, the man who would have done anything for you, he's gone. You made sure of that. I walked past her, unlocked the door to the building, and went inside without looking back. I heard her call my name one more time, a desperate, broken sound that the closing door cut off. That was the last time I ever spoke to her outside of a courtroom. The final court date arrived on a crisp autumn day. The courtroom was small and formal, all dark wood and fluorescent lighting. I sat with Marcus at one table. Melissa and her lawyer sat at the other. She looked pale and thin. Her mother, Carol, sat in the first row of the gallery, glaring at me with pure hatred. Richard was nowhere to be seen. Her lawyer began by making a passionate, emotional appeal to the judge. He painted Melissa as a victim, a fragile new mother abandoned by a cold and uncaring husband. He argued that despite the source of the house and the inheritance, my moral obligation was to provide for the woman who had been my wife. He requested the house, 5 years of rehabilitative alimony, and for me to cover all her legal fees. When he was finished, the judge, a stern-faced woman in her late 50s, looked at Marcus. "Mr. Vance, your response?" Marcus stood up. He did not use emotion. He used facts. He laid out the timeline of my deployment, the clear evidence of the affair, and the documented misuse of marital funds. He presented bank statements, credit card bills, and a summary of Peterson's reports. He methodically dismantled their entire narrative. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and steady, "my client is not asking for anything that is not his. He is a soldier who served his country honorably for 18 months. All the while believing he had a faithful wife waiting for him at home. He sent home the majority of his pay, including hazardous duty compensation, to support his wife and maintain their home. That money, however, was not used for its intended purpose. It was used by Mrs. Miller to finance a long-term affair with her boss, a Mr. Richard Sterling." He paused, letting the words sink in. Melissa sank lower in her chair. "While adultery itself is not a factor in the financial disposition, the dissipation of marital assets is," Marcus continued. "Mrs. Miller spent over $30,000 of marital funds on non-essential, personal luxuries and trips with Mr. Sterling. We are asking the court to count that amount against her share of the final settlement." Her lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection! This is character assassination." "Overruled," the judge said, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "Continue, counselor." This was the moment for the final reveal. "Thank you, Your Honor. Now, regarding the issue of property. The house at 124 Oak Street is, as established, my client's separate property, owned by him prior to the marriage. The defense has argued that my client's inheritance is a minor asset. This is a profound misrepresentation of the facts." Marcus placed a thick portfolio on the clerk's desk. "This is a full accounting of the Miller Trust, established by my client upon learning of his inheritance. The total value of the assets in this trust, consisting of securities and real property, is approximately $8.7 million. A gasp came from the gallery. I saw Carol's jaw drop. Melissa's lawyer stared, speechless. Melissa herself looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief, and for the first time, she looked directly at me. The expression on her face was not one of anger, but of pure, unadulterated shock and a sickening, dawning realization of what she had thrown away. Marcus was not finished. "The most significant asset in this trust is a 300-acre parcel of land commonly known as the Miller Farm. And this is where the deception becomes truly egregious, Your Honor. Mrs. Miller's paramour, Mr. Sterling, is a partner at Sterling Coal Properties. For the past 6 months, Sterling Coal Properties has been attempting to acquire the zoning rights to build a luxury housing development. The location for that proposed development is, in fact, the Miller Farm. It is our contention that Mrs. Miller was not only aware of this, but was actively colluding with Mr. Sterling to defraud my client. They believed the owner of the land was an absent soldier who they could manipulate into selling his family's legacy for pennies on the dollar, never realizing that the man they were targeting was the very man she was betraying. He let that hang in the air. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Melissa was as white as a sheet. She was shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no." But it was too late. The trap had closed. The judge looked through the portfolio for a long time. She read the documents from the City Planning Commission that Marcus had included. She read the valuation of the land. Finally, she looked up, peering over her glasses first at Melissa, then at me. Her judgment was swift and brutal. "Mrs. Miller, I find your claims to be not only without merit, but frankly, insulting to this court and to the service of your husband. Your dissipation of marital assets is clear and documented. Your entire testimony is rendered non-credible by the overwhelming evidence of your deception." She struck the gavel once. "The court rules as follows. The divorce is granted. The marital assets will be divided 50-50, after the $30,000 you spent on your affair is deducted from your share. You will receive no alimony. You will be responsible for your own legal fees. You will vacate the property at 124 Oak Street within 30 days. The Miller Trust and all its assets are affirmed as Mr. Miller's sole and separate property. This matter is concluded." She struck the gavel again. It was over. Melissa let out a sound, a choked, guttural sob of utter defeat. Her lawyer was trying to talk to her, but she was not listening. She was staring at me, her face a mask of horrified comprehension. She had not just lost a husband. She had lost a future she never even knew was possible. She had traded a life of absolute security and love for a cheap affair with a man who had already abandoned her, all in pursuit of a fortune that was already hers for the taking, if only she had been loyal. I stood up. I did not look at her again. I did not look at her mother. I just shook Marcus's hand, nodded to the judge, and walked out of the courtroom. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt quiet. The noise that had been in my head for months was finally gone. The mission was complete. I walked away, leaving her to the ruins of the life she had chosen. I drove not to my temporary apartment, but to the land. My land. I parked my truck by the old oak tree that my grandfather used to sit under and got out. The air was clean and cool. The city was a distant hum on the horizon. This was my future. Not a house filled with someone else's memories and lies, but open space. A blank slate. A place where I could build something new, something that was entirely my own. I thought about the simple, honest logic of a diesel engine. You find the broken parts, you remove them, and you rebuild it to be stronger than it was before. And that is exactly what I intended to do. My life was my own again. The betrayal had cost me a wife, but it had given me back myself. And in the quiet peace of that empty field, I knew I had come out ahead.